The rain poured heavily in the small town of Hollow Creek, creating a gloomy and melancholic atmosphere. As Ethan Miller delves deeper into the mystery surrounding Sarah's disappearance, he finds himself increasingly entangled in a puzzle that defies understanding. The presence of the missing girl seems to linger around him, like a secret whispered by the darkness itself. In this video, you'll dive into a story filled with suspense and twists, where every clue leads to more questions, and danger lurks around every corner. If you enjoy narratives that challenge logic and push the boundaries of reality, keep watching. The truth that Ethan is about to uncover will surprise you and keep you hooked until the very last second.
Behind the doors.
The rain poured down heavily in the small town of Hollow Creek, creating a gloomy and melancholic atmosphere. The drops drummed incessantly on the roof of Ethan Miller's bedroom, as if they wanted to share a secret he wasn't yet ready to hear. He curled up under the blankets, trying to ignore the fear that had settled in his chest. But as he closed his eyes, a strange sensation enveloped him. A light began to flicker, and the young man was startled awake. "Not again," Ethan muttered, looking at the ceiling where the lamplight flickered erratically, casting a ghostly glow across the room. His heart raced, and he felt a chill down his spine. He slowly got up, his bare feet touching the cold floor, as the light continued to flicker, as if trying to communicate. "What do you want from me?" he whispered, not knowing if any answer would come. With a surge of courage, Ethan decided he would no longer let fear dominate him. He got up and walked over to the lamp, turning it off with a decisive movement. The room plunged into dense darkness, but the presence of the flickering light still lingered in his mind, like a persistent shadow. He sat on the edge of the bed, his mind racing, and began to remember the story his grandmother had told him about a girl who had disappeared years ago named Sarah. Something about the memory drew him in, like a magnet. The next day, curiosity led him to his grandmother's house. The smell of mildew and the creak of old shelves greeted him as he entered the dusty attic. Ethan rummaged through boxes covered in dust until his hands found a worn, leather-bound diary. "What do you have to tell me?" he thought, as he opened the first page. The letters, though faded, were still legible and told the story of Sarah, a girl full of life and dreams, who had mysteriously disappeared. "She was so full of life," Ethan read aloud, feeling a shiver run down his spine. "No one ever knew what happened to her." He recalled the flickering light in his room and how everything seemed connected. With the diary in hand, he decided he needed to tell Mia about his discoveries. She had always been his confidant, the only one who could understand him. When they met at the small-town cafe, Ethan could barely contain his excitement. "Mia, you won't believe what I found," he said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "I found a diary about Sarah. She disappeared, and I feel like there's more to it." Mia, with her light brown hair tied up in a messy bun, looked at him with concern. "Ethan, are you talking about the girl who disappeared years ago? What does that have to do with you?" she asked, leaning forward, interested. "Because the light in my room flickers when I think about her. It's like she's trying to communicate with me," Ethan replied, his voice trembling slightly. "We need to investigate, Mia. We need to find out what happened to her." Mia hesitated, biting her lower lip as she processed the information. "What if it's dangerous? What if you end up getting hurt?" she questioned, her concern visible in her eyes. "I know it might be risky, but I can't ignore this. I need to understand," Ethan insisted, a flash of determination in his voice. "What if the light is a sign? What if she needs our help?" "Okay, I'm with you," Mia finally replied with a resigned sigh. "Let's find out what happened to Sarah, but please be careful. I don't want you getting hurt because of this." Ethan nodded, feeling a mix of relief and excitement. He knew the journey was just beginning, but something inside him pulsed with the certainty that the answer was within reach. He didn't know that the truth they sought was about to reveal secrets far deeper and more disturbing than they could imagine. Ethan and Mia walked down the cobblestone street leading to the Old Town School, the overcast sky reflecting the melancholy hanging in the air. The wind blew gently, as if whispering ancient secrets. The school, a building of faded red bricks, bore visible signs of time. Broken windows, creaking doors, and a garden overrun with weeds. As they arrived, the heavy atmosphere seemed to envelop them, as if the walls were soaked with memories. "Are you sure we should do this?" Mia asked, hesitating at the entrance. Her eyes, usually full of life and curiosity, were clouded by a shadow of apprehension. "We need to understand what happened to Sarah. If the light in my room really flickers when she's near, then maybe it means she needs help," Ethan replied, trying to hide his own insecurity. He pushed the door open, which creaked as it gave way, revealing a dark and dusty hallway. Inside the school, the silence was almost deafening. The echo of their footsteps resonated against the walls, creating a sensation that they were being watched. As they advanced, Ethan noticed a mural on the right wall, covered with faded photos. He approached, his heart racing as he saw the radiant smile of a young girl standing out among familiar faces. "Look, it's Sarah!" Ethan exclaimed, pointing to the image. He looked at Mia, who came closer, her eyes wide. "She looks so happy and full of life," Mia said, her voice soft, almost reverent. "It's hard to believe she disappeared." "That's what we need to find out," Ethan affirmed, his gaze fixed on the photos. "Who were her friends? What happened that day?" As they examined the mural, a soft whisper drifted through the air, a sound almost imperceptible, but enough to make Ethan's skin crawl. He looked at Mia, who also seemed to have heard it. "What was that?" she asked, clutching his arm as if seeking protection. "I don't know," Ethan replied in a low voice. "But we need to keep going. Let's head to the abandoned classroom. There might be more clues there." They made their way to the classroom, and the atmosphere seemed to change as they approached. Daylight barely penetrated through the dust-covered windows, and the smell of mildew was strong. When they entered, the silence was palpable, broken only by the sound of a paper rustling in the wind. "Look!" Mia pointed to a corner of the room where a desk was almost completely covered in debris. "There's something there." Ethan approached and, crouching down, noticed a small object glinting among the rubble. "It's a necklace, girl," he said, holding it carefully. The pendant was star-shaped and adorned with intricate details. "It could be Sarah's," Mia suggested, her expression shifting from fear to intense curiosity. "Maybe she left it here." "We need to take this. It might help us understand what happened," Ethan decided, pocketing the necklace. As they left the room, a noise echoed down the hallway, as if something had been dragged. They both stopped and exchanged glances, the fear reflected in their eyes. "What was that?" Mia asked, her voice almost a whisper. "I don't know. Let's get out of here," Ethan replied, firmly grabbing her hand. They ran toward the exit, their hearts pounding wildly in their chests. When they arrived home, the tension still lingered in the air. Ethan went up to his room, feeling the need to check if the light was still flickering. As soon as he entered, his heart skipped a beat. The light was flickering frantically, casting an unsettling pattern across the room. "Sarah?" he murmured, his voice trembling. And then, in the center of the room, he saw a silhouette. It was the figure of a girl, with long hair and a sad expression. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine, but also an inexplicable sense of connection. "Mia, come here!" he shouted, not taking his eyes off the ethereal form that seemed to glow with its own light. And when Mia entered, the figure vanished, leaving only the light flickering intensely. "Ethan, what happened?" she asked, alarmed. I saw her. It was Sarah," he replied, his voice full of disbelief. "She was right here." Mia looked around, trying to grasp the magnitude of what had just happened. "We need to figure out what she wants," she said, determined. "This is just the beginning." Ethan and Mia were sitting at a worn wooden table in the small-town diner, the fluorescent light flickering slightly as they went over the information they had gathered about Sarah. The aroma of fresh coffee and chocolate muffins filled the air, but the atmosphere was thick with tension. "Have you thought about how many people might have seen or heard something about her?" Mia asked, looking at the notebook where they had written everything down. "We need to talk to the older residents. They might remember details we haven't found yet." Ethan nodded, concern etched on his face. "Yeah, but what if they don't want to talk? Or if they think we're being weird?" "We can't let fear stop us, Ethan. We need to find out the truth." If Sarah is really trying to communicate with you, we have to understand what happened." Mia's determined look made Ethan feel a little more confident. After a few frustrating attempts to find someone willing to share their memories, they decided to visit the home of a man named Harold, one of the few residents who still clearly remembered the disappearance of Sarah and Thomas. He was known in town for his stories about the past. Harold's house was an old structure with dusty windows and an unkempt garden. When they rang the doorbell, the sound echoed through the silent surroundings. After a few moments, the door slowly opened, revealing an elderly man with white hair and tired but piercing eyes. "Who are you?" he asked in a raspy voice. "Hi, Mr. Harold. We're from town. We're trying to learn more about Sarah, the girl who disappeared years ago. Could you help us?" Ethan spoke, trying to sound friendly. Harold hesitated, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the young people before him. "Sarah. It's been so long. Many tried to forget. But we don't want to forget. We want to understand what happened," Mia said, her voice full of hope. The old man sighed and gestured for them to enter. "Come in then, but remember, memories can be painful." They sat in the living room, surrounded by black and white photographs and old furniture. Harold began to recount Sarah's story, his eyes lost in a distant past. She had a brother, Thomas. They were very close. When she disappeared, he became obsessed. He never stopped looking for her until, well, he disappeared too. Disappeared? "Do you know what happened to him?" Ethan asked, feeling a cold knot in his stomach. "Not exactly. Some people said he was seen wandering the woods, calling her name. But after that, he just vanished." The town fell silent. People didn't want to talk about it anymore. Harold looked down, as if the memories weighed heavily on his shoulders. Mia, restless, asked, "Do you think they're together somehow?" "Maybe. Or maybe Thomas did something to find her that he shouldn't have," Harold replied, his voice now lower. "But that's just speculation. What really matters is that the pain of that loss never left many of us." Ethan felt a knot form in his stomach. Her presence. It's strong, especially when I'm home. The light in my room flickers whenever I feel like she's near. It's like she's calling me. "You believe she needs help?" Harold asked, observing Ethan with a serious look. "Yes, and that's why we're here. We want to find out what happened to her and to Thomas," Ethan replied, his determination growing. Harold shook his head slowly. "Be careful, young ones. Some truths can be more terrifying than the loss itself. Curiosity is a sharp blade." As they left Harold's house, Ethan felt a weight on his chest. What else could have happened between Sarah and Thomas? The light in his room was beginning to feel less like a sign of hope and more like a call to something unknown and dark. They had clues, but the truth seemed ever more distant, like an echo lost in the mist of the past. The night was shrouded in mystery as Ethan Miller found himself drawn to the woods. The full moon illuminated the path, casting dancing shadows among the trees. He felt Sarah's presence stronger than ever, as if she were calling out to him, begging for help. The wind whispered through the leaves and Ethan's heart raced, mixing anxiety with determination. He knew he needed to discover the truth and perhaps free the soul of the girl who haunted him. As he walked, the light on his phone flickered intermittently, as if it were responding to the energy emanating from the woods. Ethan stopped in front of a small abandoned cabin, hidden among the trees. The place seemed forgotten by time, covered in moss and with broken windows. Yet the light on his phone flickered frantically, as if trying to guide him inside. "Is this where you want me to go, Sarah?" Ethan murmured, hesitating for a moment. He took a deep breath and pushed open the cabin door, which creaked loudly. The interior was dark and dusty, but there was something familiar in the air, a sense that he wasn't alone. As soon as he entered, a shiver ran down his spine. The phone's light illuminated the walls, revealing drawings and scribbled words, as if someone had tried to communicate there. Ethan walked cautiously, exploring the space with a mix of curiosity and fear. The light on his phone began to flicker even more intensely, and he felt a wave of energy course through his body. "Sarah?" he called, his voice echoing in the empty cabin. "Are you here?" Suddenly the phone's light went out, and darkness enveloped Ethan. The silence was deafening, and he tried to stay calm. Then, a soft light began to glow in the corner of the room. Ethan turned, and there she was, the ethereal figure of Sarah, with a sad and desperate look. "Ethan." Her voice was like a whisper, barely audible. "You have to help me." Ethan felt his heart race. "What happened to you, Sarah? Why are you stuck here?" She moved forward slowly, almost floating, her eyes reflecting deep pain. "I can't find peace. Something is keeping me tied to this place. Something I can't remember." The light began to flicker again, and Ethan realized the cabin was filling with a strange energy. "What is this? What's happening?" he asked, looking around, feeling the tension in the air. "It's my fear," Sarah replied, her voice trembling. "I can't move on until the truth is revealed. You need to discover what happened that night, the night I disappeared." "But how?" Ethan was utterly confused. "What do you want me to do? Find what I hid?" "The answer lies in the things I left behind. You need to go to the school, the mural." "They know," Sarah said, her gaze fixed on a distant point, as if she were trapped in a memory she couldn't access. Ethan felt a surge of determination. "I will find the truth, Sarah. I promise I won't give up on you." The light began to flicker more intensely, and Ethan realized that Sarah's presence was fading. "Wait, don't go. What else do I need to know?" "Be careful, Ethan." Her voice was becoming a distant echo. "Be careful what you seek. Sometimes what we find is not what we expect." Before he could respond, the light went out completely, and Sarah's figure vanished. Ethan was left alone in the cabin, his heart heavy and his mind racing with questions. He knew he needed to go back to the school and investigate more about Sarah's past and what really happened that fateful night. The light in his room might be flickering, but now he had a clear purpose: to uncover the truth and perhaps free the soul of the girl who haunted him. Ethan and Mia found themselves at a crossroads. The revelations about Thomas, Sarah's brother, weighed heavily on them. That afternoon, as the light in Ethan's room flickered incessantly, they decided they needed to delve deeper into the boy's story. Sitting at the kitchen table in Ethan's house, surrounded by books and notes, the atmosphere was thick with tension. "Do you really think Thomas can help us understand what happened to Sarah?" Mia asked, her eyes shining with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "I don't know, but it seems like he was the last person to see her. We need to find out where he was that night," Ethan replied, running his hand through his hair, frustrated. "If the town legend is true, he must have left some clue. Maybe we can ask some of the older residents, or even go to his house," Mia suggested, excited by the idea of a new investigation. With this determination, the two headed to Thomas's old house, which remained intact, as if time had stopped. As they approached, they felt a shiver down their spines, as if the house were alive, holding dark secrets. The door creaked as they pushed it open, revealing a dusty interior, filled with furniture covered by white sheets. "Look here," Ethan said, pointing to the attic, which seemed to promise more mysteries. "Let's see what we can find up there." Climbing the creaking stairs, they reached the attic, which exuded a musty smell and disuse. Daylight filtered through a small window, illuminating boxes and forgotten objects. Ethan began to open some boxes, while Mia examined the walls, which were covered with newspaper clippings about Sarah's disappearance and Thomas's intense search. "Ethan, come here," Mia called, her tone urgent. He approached and saw what she had found: a diary, yellowed by time, which seemed to belong to Thomas. "Can you read it?" he asked, anticipation growing. "Let's see," Mia said, carefully opening the diary. The pages were filled with notes about Sarah, her dreams and fears, but there were also mentions of a growing sense of possessiveness that Thomas had for her. "Look at this. I can't let her go. She's mine." "This is disturbing, Ethan." "It seems there was more to their relationship than just sibling love," Ethan speculated, analyzing the words carefully. "This might have something to do with what happened that night." As they leafed through the diary, a metallic object fell from one of the boxes, startling them. It was a small music box covered in dust. Mia picked it up, and when she opened it, A soft melody began to play, filling the attic with a nostalgic feeling. "Do you remember this music? It's the one that played at the town festival," Mia said, the sparkle in her eyes revealing a childhood memory. "It had special meaning for Sarah." "Yes, I remember. She always danced when this music played," Ethan replied, a lump forming in his throat. "What does this mean, Mia?" The light in Ethan's room flickered again, more intensely than ever, as if it were responding to the intensity of the moment. "I think we're getting close to discovering something important," Mia said, looking at Ethan with determination. "We need to find more information." "Something that connects the two. Something that tells us what really happened that night," Ethan stated, closing the diary and keeping the music box as a sign that they were getting closer to the truth. When they left the house, the feeling that time was running out pursued them. The light was flickering with urgency, like a beacon in the darkness, calling for answers. "Let's go back home and analyze all this," Ethan suggested, as a cold breeze passed, bringing with it a whisper that seemed to say, "Help me." The road back was silent, but the tension between them was palpable. What more would they discover about Sarah and Thomas? What was the real secret that the town of Hollow Creek had hidden for so long? The questions hung in the air, and the feeling that they were about to uncover something deep drove them forward. They knew they needed to act quickly, before the mystery became an even more threatening shadow. The cutting wind blew through the streets of Hollow Creek as Ethan and Mia walked determinedly towards the small town's central square. The sun was setting, casting long, dark shadows, and with each step, the anxiety within Ethan grew. He needed to understand what really happened to Sarah and Thomas, and he was willing to confront the residents who, until now, had been reluctant to share their memories. "Are you sure they'll help us?" Mia asked, her brown eyes filled with concern. "We have to try. We can't let this end without answers," Ethan replied, the firmness in his voice reflecting the determination that pulsed in his heart. As they reached the square, they spotted a group of elderly men sitting on a bench, talking quietly. Ethan remembered some stories he had heard during his childhood about how these residents had been friends with Sarah and Thomas. With hesitant steps, he approached. "Hi, sirs. Sorry to interrupt, but we'd like to know more about Sarah and Thomas. What happened to them?" Ethan's voice was a mix of hope and fear. The men exchanged significant looks. One of them, a gray-haired man named Harold, finally spoke. "You're too young to be getting into old business. What happened to those kids is something many prefer to forget." "But we need to know. We can't just ignore what happened," Mia interjected, her voice filled with emotion. "Thomas didn't disappear willingly. He was taken." "Taken? By whom?" Harold frowned. "Things aren't as simple as they seem, young lady. There's a sect that always believed Thomas had a special gift. They kept him hidden, believing he could help them communicate with the dead." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "So Thomas is alive?" "Alive? In a sense, perhaps. But what he became is another story. Sarah, on the other hand, isn't the victim you think she is. The truth is, in her quest for power and control, she became something much darker." Harold looked down, sadness in his eyes. "What do you mean? What are you saying?" Ethan asked, confused. "She had some sort of influence over Thomas. He was obsessed with her, and that made her vulnerable to forces she didn't understand. When she disappeared, Thomas gave himself over to the darkness, and the sect took him in, believing he could resurrect his sister." Harold's voice trembled as he spoke, as if the memories haunted him. Ethan and Mia exchanged a look. The revelation was devastating. She's not a victim?" Mia questioned, almost in a whisper. "No. She's responsible for Thomas's disappearance, and now he's become a shadow, trapped between two worlds, feeding on his anger and desire for revenge." Harold stood up, his expression grave. "If you really want to help, you must go to the cabin. That's where it all began and where it can end." With their hearts racing, Ethan and Mia said goodbye to the men and headed toward the cabin. The sky darkened quickly, and the light in Ethan's room flickered in his mind like a distant call. Arriving at the cabin, the atmosphere was heavy, and a sense of despair hung in the air. "Ethan, is this really a good idea?" Mia questioned, hesitant. "We have to do this, for Sarah and Thomas," he replied, the determination firm in his voice. As soon as they entered the cabin, the light began to flicker frantically, and a sense of intense cold enveloped the room. Ethan felt like something was approaching. He positioned himself in the center of the room, closing his eyes and focusing. "Sarah, Thomas, we're here to help," he shouted, his voice echoing against the wooden walls. At that moment, a shadow began to form before him. The air grew heavy, and a figure appeared, its face shrouded in mist. You came?" The voice was a whisper, laden with pain. "Thomas," Ethan exclaimed, recognizing Sarah's brother's presence. "What happened to you?" The shadow stirred, revealing traces of despair. "She trapped me, in her game. Her desire for power consumed me. I need help." Ethan realized the truth was more complex than he had imagined. Sarah was not the victim, but rather the one responsible for all this torment. To free Thomas and Sarah, he would have to confront her spirit, something that terrified him. But he couldn't hesitate now. He needed to act.